Okay, so are you able to see my screen? Yes, guys. So Hibernate is the ORM. Hibernate is a ORM stands for Object Relational Mapping. So there are many ORMs. There are many ORMs. Eclipse Link is a ORM. Top Link is a ORM. And there similarly Hibernate also is an ORM. So the ORM which we are studying in our syllabus is Hibernate. Now what this Hibernate ORM does is, you're able to see my screen, right? Yes, guys. So this is my Java application, and this is my database. So irrespective whichever database you are having, let's say I have. So in between we have a component, okay, that is Hibernate. Now how Hibernate works is, we have a session factory. So this is what? Session factory. Then using that session factory, we can create many sessions. We can create many sessions, and like this many more. We can create many sessions. So let's call this as session 1, session 2, blah blah blah, session n. I can make n number of sessions. But this session is a very heavy object. It's a very heavy object, requires consumes rather, it consumes lots of resources. So if you don't need those many objects, please do not create unnecessary. And once work is done, please close the session. Once the work is done, please close it. And unnecessary, do not create unwanted sessions, because that will slow up your system, because it is a very heavy object. Now what ORM does now is, if I have a particular class of whose data I want to store in the database. So let's come back to here when we were doing JDBC. When we were doing JDBC, now this is the class whose record I want to store in the database. So let's say insert. So what was I doing? Taking individual data. So I would be better off that I could have created an object of the employee class. I could have made a class employee. In that I could have put these three as data members, employee number, employee name, salary. So I could have made a class employee. In that I would have put the data members as employee number, the employee name, and the salary. And then whatever constructor, whatever we put, constructors, setter, getter, to string, you can put all that on. Okay, so this would be my image package. I will call this as my entity class in the model package. And then I would have one more package called as the driver app. In that I would write the main. Okay, so in my Java application, I will put this into the model package, and I will make one more class, driver app. So now if I want to store the object of the employee in the database, what we have to do here in ORM is first thing, create the object of that class. Okay, so if you have a parameterized constructor, you can use that. You have the object, the driver app. Now what we have to do is make a session factory. This is, and from that session factory make a session. So this session is the heart of your Hibernate. So all the Hibernate work will be done by the session. So once we have this object, I will make a object of this session also. Session is a class. Of that I am making object session 1. We can start, we can begin the session. Let's say once it begins, the exact code I will show you all later on. Then all I have to do in Hibernate is just give this object of the employee to the session. So just pass on this object. So we are going to follow the hexagon for the object. So whatever object I have made over here, roll number 18, ename vk, and percentage, whatever object I have made, I will just pass on this object to the session. Now Hibernate has all the database related activities. Hibernate will first, whichever class I annotate with add entity, whichever class I annotate with add entity, it will make a database table of that class. Now programmer will not make the database table. Database table will be created for you by Hibernate. All you have to do is whichever table you want to create, make a class for that and annotate that class with add entity. So table will be created in the background with all small, and the attribute of that class becomes the column of that table. And you have to have one primary key compulsory. So employee number is the primary key. So that column we can annotate with add ID. That is the primary key. So if you're having an add entity, add ID is compulsory. This is compulsory. You cannot have an entity without an ID. Now this creation of table behind the scenes is done by Hibernate for us. We as programmer do not have to create table. As I call the save method of the session, this record is inserted into the database. I do not have to write any query. I do not have to write any query to create table, insert record. All of that is done by Hibernate behind the scenes. All I have to do is just create object. So this object is being mapped to the database table. This is what Hibernate is doing. So this object which I made over here, this object which I have made over here, this object has been mapped to a database row. So that's why the name ORM, object to relational table mapping. So now all I need to do is just create object and pass the object to the Hibernate session, and the Hibernate session will store the object into the database for me. Same, I want to get a particular record, I just have to say session.get, and I have to say which class object I want and what is the primary key. So I have to say give me the object of student class with the primary key value as 18. Hibernate. So I have to just communicate with the Hibernate session now. So I will just say get, and it will go to the database, fetch me this, okay, and give me the object over here. So on the LHS, I will have a reference of the student class. So I will say student. So now whatever JDBC code we were writing and whatever manual queries we were writing, going forward we don't have to write any of the manual SQL queries to create table, to fetch the data, to save the data, delete the data, update the data. All we have to do is just manipulate the object. This is what ORM does. If I explain it in theory, okay. So what it does, state of the object in Java application is temporary. If I would have shut down, okay, we start the application, okay, application is running now. I stop the application. What happens? Whatever object I have made is lost because this data is temporary. If I want to make this data persistent and long lasting, I can use Hibernate so that I can store the state of this object into the database table. So that is the purpose of Hibernate, to make the object persistent. Okay. So state of the object in Java is temporary. I want to make it permanent. Thus making the object long lasting means persistent. So we can store the object state in a relational DBMS by mapping the object to the database row. By mapping the object to the database row. So the object is mapped to the database row. That is called as ORM, object relational mapping. Invented by Gavin King in the year 2001. It's a ORM. ORM means object in Java is mapped to a database row in a database table. It is open source. Okay, so there is no extra cost incurred in using Hibernate. It is non-invasive. Non-invasive means like how we have our servlets. If you observe, servlet is invasive style of programming. Whenever you will see servlet, no, servlet will always insist that you use you extend the HTTP servlet. Servlet is an invasive style. Whenever you make a servlet, it will always insist that you extend from this class. So that is called as, you know, invasive style of programming. That you are always If you want to use this feature, you have to implement this interface. If you want to use this feature, you have to extend this class. Okay, so it will always force you to implement any interface or extend any class. But Hibernate is not like that. Hibernate is non-invasive. Hibernate will not force you to extend any class or implement any interface. Non-invasive. It will not insist on extending a class or implementing an interface. It is lightweight. Hibernate only have features regards to database connection. Hibernate only manages the database part. Only, so it has only classes and interfaces which deals with making the object persistent. Apart from that, it does not have any other facility. So the number of classes are limited. So it is lightweight. So it focuses only on its functionality. Okay, high performance. I will go later on and we will see what is caching, what is lazy initialization. So Hibernate has high performance because of lazy initialization, caching, and Hibernate is data independent. The same session we can connect to Oracle database also. So Hibernate is not tied up to any particular database vendor. You can communicate with any of the database. Just you have to have the driver of that database with us. So if you have the driver, you can connect to any of the database, whether it is Oracle or Postgres, any database you have, you can connect with Hibernate. Okay, see over here. These are the various Hibernates we have in the market. Hibernate is an ORM, Top Link is an ORM, MyBatis is an ORM, Eclipse Link is an ORM. So you have many ORMs in the market. Now these are the advantages which Hibernate has over conventional JDBC. So JDBC, Hibernate has, so in JDBC you have to write the manual queries. Here no need to write the query, just create the object. Query will be generated behind the scenes by Hibernate for us. So when I do save, the insert query will be there behind the scenes. So save will have the insert query, get will have the select query, save will have which query? The insert query will be generated by Hibernate. If you want to see the query, you can see the query also on the console. When I say get, which query will be selected? The select query. When I say add entity, which query will be executed? The create table query. So all the queries are done behind the scene by Hibernate. I don't have to add the query. Okay. So Hibernate in Hibernate we can do ORM. In JDBC we cannot do ORM, right? Caching. Caching means if the now this object is there in the session. Next time when I get to request the object, I will first search in the session. If it is found in the session, I will not query the database. I will only query the database when the object is not present in the session. So this will increase my performance speed also. So those objects which are frequently used, I will keep that in the session cache. So I can directly fetch it from that cache. No need to go to the database if the object is there in the session. So that is called caching. Will improve the speed. So we have first level cache, second level cache. We'll try to implement that. It has its own language also, HQL, Hibernate Query Language. So it is just a part of SQL, but little bit short. Okay, so it is just a SQL, but a little shortcut of SQL, shorthand of SQL. You can communicate with any database. You can do transaction management. Lazy loading is supported. It is not supported over here. Okay. Other things also, pagination, all that we can do. So what was the limitation of JDBC? So when we were doing JDBC last on Friday, we saw That in JDBC, programmer has to register the driver, programmer has to create the connection, programmer has to write the create database table code, programmer has to write the SQL query and execute it, and if it is a select query, programmer has to store the result in the result set. Okay, so all these were done by the programmer. So now what your Hibernate does, it automates all that, and programmer only has to create the object and give it to Hibernate. Hibernate will do all the remaining stuff. Okay, see, we, that is programmer, will only create an object and give it to Hibernate, and Hibernate will do the remaining part of inserting into the database. Okay, remaining part of creating table and inserting into database. Okay, so Hibernate has methods such as save, update, get. These are all methods of Hibernate: get, load. Now the class name will be mapped to the database table, and the attributes will be mapped to the column name. As I said, the class name will be mapped to the database table, okay, and the attributes will be mapped to the table column. To do the mapping, we have to use lot of annotation. So, which two annotations have we studied so far in Hibernate? Add entity and add ID. Add entity means that class whose table you want to create in the database, you will unlock such classes with add entity. And every entity class compulsory has to have a primary key. The primary key we will mark as add ID. And this is an example of Hibernate now. So our task is just to give the object to the session. Rest, whatever JDBC code is to be done, that who will manage for us. Whatever insertion or whatever selection is to be done, who will do for us? Session. So that's why. Okay, so if I have to create the session, I need object of, yes, session factory, right? And is this using session factory object? How many sessions can I create? One or two or many? Using session factory, how many sessions can I create? One, two, or many sessions? Many. So, but if I want to use only one and I create five and keep, is that advisable? I am using only one session, but I have created five sessions. Is it advisable, recommended? Why? Why no? Because it's a, tell me, see over here, consume lots of resources. So unwanted, it will slow down the application.